Couple of notations. First of all, I hope you reserve your clapping till the end, and your cheering and your support till the end. We will be passing the hat this evening, so if you'd like to donate to make forums like this possible, please give generously. The structure of the debate will go like this. Each person will have 4 minutes to give an opening statement, and they will also get some time at the end. We flipped a coin and given them their choice, so we'll start off with Steve Lazarus of the Ohio Association of Professional Firefighters, followed by Senator Coley. And then we'll go back and forth with 2 minutes to comment on your questions each. They will rotate who goes first with the response to your question. So I guess we'll get underway. Steve Lazarus of the Ohio Association of Professional Firefighters, your opening statement.
Thank you very much, Doc. And everybody hear me all right? Okay. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to start out and let you know that I've spent the last 22 years negotiating labor agreements for police and fire unions. And I'm here speaking tonight in that regard, talking about how this bill would affect police officers and firefighters. I want to start out and say that the history of why we have the current law is very important to understand before that law is jettisoned. And the reason that the collective bargaining law was passed in 1984 was because there were illegal police and fire strikes that were going on all over the state of Ohio. Police officers and firefighters, like other public employees, did not have the right to collectively bargain. They had no outlet, and as a result of that, even though it was illegal at that time to strike, there were police and fire strikes. The city of Cincinnati in 1979 had an illegal police strike that was the result of 4 police officers being killed in a 10-month period of time. After each one of those deaths, the police officers went to city council, requested bulletproof vests, requested higher caliber ammunition, and they were rebuffed at each request. And after the 4th officer was killed, police officers parked their cars all around City Hall, and all from this area you may remember this, parked their cars, hundreds of police cars around City Hall, locked the cars, marched down to the police memorial, dropped the keys in a box, and walked off the job for 24 hours. This was going on all around the state of Ohio. The city of Toledo almost burned down because of illegal fire strikes. So the legislature recognized in the early 1980s that something had to be done to fix this, because it was not acceptable to businesses, much less the citizens of this state, if they didn't have police and fire protection. That led to the creation of the collective bargaining law in 1984. It provided a process for police officers and firefighters to say that they could not strike. And everyone recognized you cannot allow police officers and firefighters to walk off the job. So police officers and firefighters were not permitted to strike, but in exchange they were given binding arbitration by a neutral third party who would come in, allow both sides to present their evidence on any issues that they couldn't work out themselves, and that party would make a binding decision. Columbus Dispatch, when Senate Bill 5 came up, did a study of this and said just how big of an issue is this binding arbitration. And they looked at all of the binding arbitrations for the years 2009 and 2010. Keep in mind there were thousands of negotiations in those 2 years. How many cases do you think went to binding arbitration in those 2 years? 20 cases went to binding arbitration in 2 years. Management, 110. The unions, 110. The wage proposals that each party made, these binding arbitration hearings, were approximately 1% apart. This binding arbitration has become a centerpiece of what we're dealing with here, because what happens under Issue 2, Senate Bill 5, is that process is gone. And instead, if you can't work out your negotiations at the bargaining table, there's still a hearing. But instead of having a neutral third party, city council or the county commissioners hold a hearing. So one of the parties to the dispute actually holds the hearing, and they make the decision as to who wins. Now, I've been doing this a long time, and I can tell you right now that I will lose every time, because the party who is left to decide the dispute, one of the parties is going to make the final decision. And that's the centerpiece of the problem. Thank you.
Senator Coley, your opening statement.
Recently, the Ohio General Assembly dealt with issues involving how employees of both state and local government negotiate for compensation. A controversial bill was introduced into the Ohio Senate. Hearings were held, there were protests, and the bill was passed by the majority party over the objections of the minority party. The Ohio House of Representatives then took up the bill. More hearings were held, there were more protests. Modifications to the bill were made, and the bill was again passed by the majority party over the objections of the minority party. The Ohio Senate quickly concurred with the changes made by the Ohio House, and the bill was promptly signed into law by a governor of the same majority party. That governor was Governor Celeste. The bill that he signed in 1983, Senate Bill 133, virtually began public union collective bargaining here in Ohio just 28 years ago. A wise man once said, all government employees should realize that the process of collective bargaining, as usually understood, cannot be transplanted into the public service. That man was President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who wrote those very words in 1937 in a letter to the head of the National Federation of Federal Employees. Now, it's not only FDR that understood the problems with public unions and collective bargaining. Former AFL-CIO President George Meany wrote in 1955 that, quote, "It is impossible to bargain collectively with the government," unquote. Now, you may be asking yourself, why should there be any difference between negotiations in the private sector and those in the public sector? Well, when a private business negotiates with its employees, they are deciding how to divide up the revenues of that business. When the government negotiates with its employees, they are deciding how to divvy up your money, since the only money that the government has is money that is taken from you. A number of us in the General Assembly believe that you know best how to spend your own money, and that we should limit the amount of money that we take from you to the minimum that we need to comply with our constitutional requirements. Of course, there are others who have different beliefs. Over the years, the problems with collective bargaining here in Ohio have been growing, and this year the General Assembly finally gathered the courage to face the problems head on. We passed Senate Bill 5, which affects only government employees and modifies but does not eliminate collective bargaining procedures that were established in 1983. The law that you will be reviewing does three basic things. It requires that all employees pay at least 10% of their retirement. It requires that all employees pay at least 15% of their health insurance premiums. And it requires that at least some part of employees' pay be based on how well they do their job. It should come as no surprise that there are those who benefit from the current law, and they are opposed to any changes. If you think that everyone from the school superintendent to the employees in the lunchroom should pay at least 10% of their retirement, you should vote yes on issue 2. If you think that everyone from the chief of police to the newest patrolman should pay at least 15% of their health insurance premiums, you should vote yes on issue 2. If you think that performance in the public sector should mean something just like it does in the private sector, you should vote yes on issue 2. I look forward to a chance to answer any of your questions, and thank you all for being here tonight.
All right, very good, gentlemen. You have one of those for the opening. Time to get review now. Who has questions for Senator Coley? Step up to the microphone, sir. Let people will help you up, help you out there, make sure you're on track. You can also start lining up over here or be prepared to do so after this question. As I said before, they'll each get 2 minutes to respond to your questions, and we'll go back and forth and who goes first to respond. Also, as I said before, please keep in mind we do have the one breath rule. This is not necessarily the forum for you to pontificate, but rather ask a question and try to keep them brief. Sir, please step up, introduce yourself, and Senator Coley will go first.
Yes, I'm Jay Richter. I live in Westchester Township. I'm a financial planner, and many of my clients are public employees, in particular educators. And something that's lost in the ads and the discussion tonight is, as it was stated, about 10% and 15%. It's pretty simple to me. I'm a bottom line person, and so are my clients. That's pre-tax money. it's not costing you 10% out of take-home pay. It's costing you only 7 to 8% depending upon your tax bracket. It's not costing you 15%, it's costing you 12 to 13% out of take-home pay. That's pretty basic stuff, but nobody seemed to think that didn't even come up in the discussion in Wisconsin. Or is that too tough for people to figure out? 20% tax bracket, it's only costing you 80 cents on the dollar.
Do you have a question about that?
Yeah, I mean, why is it not being discussed? It's not 10, it's 7 to 8
Senator Coley?
out of take-home pay.
Well, I mean, you're highlighting, I mean, you know, I don't know why it's not being discussed. But when you look at, you know, the number of misstatements in this, I mean, Steve used one a minute ago, he said neutral third party. Now, you need a glossary for tonight. When Steve uses the term neutral third party, what he means is an unelected person, usually a labor lawyer, who is going to be given the ability to make a final decision. You know, my version of the Constitution seems to indicate that elected officials who are responsible to the voters should have the final say. And Steve neglected to point out that we put in a mechanism in the House when the bill came over the House, and I was one of the guys who put it in the committee. We put in a mechanism so that when a dispute arises, if you're not happy with the decision that the elected body makes, as Steve described it, the voters can then have the final say. We don't think of unelected labor lawyers should make the final decisions. We think voters should make final decisions, and that's why we think issue 2 should be passed, and that's why we think that voters are going to support it. So I don't know why there's so much distortion and so many lies going on about issue 2, you know, that people haven't taken time to address the issue that you're talking about.
I just call it a suggestion. It's
Okay.
not 10.
Steve Lazarus, your 2-minute rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you. There is nothing in the bill that allows, if the unions are unhappy with the decision, to take that back to the voters. The only provision in the bill that deals with that is found in, and everyone can look at this themselves, section 4117.141. And what that says is that if the decision of the legislative body requires additional funds, then the voters can decide if they like that or not. There is no mechanism in place in this bill anywhere that allows a union that is unhappy with the decision of the other party in the dispute to actually take that to the voters. Nothing. Second point, sir, on your particular issue, getting back to that, this bill is very, very unclear on this 15% issue on the insurance. There's 2 places in the bill to deal with this, because we keep hearing, and Senator Coley actually mentioned this, that the employees have to pay 15% of the premiums. That makes that, I can understand what that means. The problem with that is that the health insurance issue is dealt with in 2 different places in this bill. The part of the bill that's for state employees actually says what Senator Coley said, and that's found in Revised Code 124.82H. You want to look this up. That does say that they pay 15% of the cost of the premiums assessed for the insurance. Now, we go to everybody else. There's a whole other section, 4117.08E. That says that no public employer shall agree to a provision that requires the public employer to pay more than 85% of the cost paid for health care benefits. That's a very different standard. We have 2 different standards in the same bill. And frankly, I don't understand what that means. What is 15% of the cost paid for health care benefits? How do you calculate that? How do you calculate that?
All right, very good. Do we have another question? Somebody may go from this side. Somebody have a question? Yeah, step up, introduce yourself, and you'll be addressing Steve Lazarus first, and then Senator Coley will respond.
Okay, I'm Leo Gray, and my question is this, that the Lakota school system has basically made some adjustments to meet the specs of SB 5. What has the firefighters union done to make adjustments? Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'll speak to several different, each one, every group has their own labor agreement. So it's very difficult to, there's hundreds of labor agreements out there. But by way of some examples in this area, the Franklin firefighters agreed to forego a 3% raise a year or so ago that they were awarded in their contract. The Cincinnati Police in 2009, over approximately 7 pay periods, gave back over $1,000 per member, totaling over $1 million in gives backs to the city of Cincinnati. 2009, again, the Hamilton Police agreed to 5 furlough days, along with foregoing several other benefits in their contract that they were due. Marine firefighters in 2010 gave a 10% give back to the city. 2009, the Xenia firefighters agreed not to take a 3% pay increase that they were due, and also give back a 5% pay. And these are just some examples, sir. This is happening all over the state of Ohio. And keep in mind that this was happening before, because I've heard that, well, nobody was doing any of this until Senate Bill 5 came out. The examples that I gave you, most of them were from 2009 to 2010, before this legislation was ever introduced. This was being done in response to a bad economy. When management came to the union and said, we need your help, and the unions responded, and it can be done right now under the current law, and it is working. There are other things out there that also have been done that allow for management and labor to work together. City of Toledo, we've heard about the City of Toledo and what happened up there, and the mayor saying, I'm not going to have enough time to get into this. But if you want to talk more about that later, I'll get back to you. So I'm sorry, I've run out of time. Thank you.
Senator Coley?
You know, your question points out, some of the issues. I love it when Steve talks about give backs, like somehow somebody was entitled to that money that is actually the taxpayers' money. When he got into fact finding relative to his recent contract with the City of Cincinnati Fire Department, here's some of the things, and I have Steve's report that he filed. He was asking that the city impose trash collection fees. He was asking that the city eliminate daycare inspections. He was asking that the city stop weekly yard waste. These are all so that there would be more money to fund firefighters. He was asking that the city cut healthcare centers, dental centers, regionally sexually transmitted disease clinics, nonprofit healthcare centers. He asked to reduce the school resource officers and school nurses. Then he advocated for increasing the property tax. He not that I disagree with this one, but he asked the streetcar project be eliminated. These are the kind of problems that when you leave the law the way it is, and this is what FDR and George Meany were talking about. This does not work in a governmental setting. Unelected labor lawyers shouldn't make these decisions. Your elected officials should make these decisions. And when it comes to concern about firefighters and police and all the people that provide government service, you shouldn't leave the whims of contract negotiations and just the timing of when all these contract negotiations hit to define the benefits of government employees. You have situations right now up in Middletown where you have some members of the city workforce in certain bargaining units are getting raises. Other members in different units are getting laid off. And everybody acknowledges a tough financial circumstance. So this is the reason we want to put control back into local government, and that's why you should support issue 2.
All right, we have a question right here. Step up, just introduce yourself, and you'll be addressing Senator Coley first, and then Steve Lazarus will respond.
Absolutely. My name is John Harwood. I am a Middletown firefighter. It's funny you mentioned the city of Middletown because the fire union on several occasions is trying to get back their raises, and the city wouldn't allow us to do it to try to save forces on the street. So I appreciate you bringing that up. The first part of 2 questions is you mentioned our pension and the fact that everybody pays 10%. I'm just kind of wondering the number that I have heard is pretty high as far as how many unions pay their 10%. And also, I think I've also heard that it actually benefits the city to, in some instances, pick up that 10% part of the pension in lieu of giving raises because then they don't have to pay as much in taxes. And also, you talked about the arbitrators being labor attorneys. I'm just kind of wondering what data you have to support that, because I've never seen an arbitrator's list full of labor attorneys. That would be obviously great for our side, but I've never seen it, so I'm just kind of wondering.
Okay, Senator Coley, why don't you go first? And before Senator gets to his comments, I appreciate your thoughts. Please try to keep these relatively short and ask specific questions. That'll make it, move on. I know we have a lot of opinions. A lot of people want to comment on stuff and even challenge certain things they've said. Please form it into a question and keep it relatively short. Senator Coley.
When we fund state and local government, we're creating a bucket of money that is used to pay for the items that we deem important. The amount of money is not unlimited. So, as some groups insist on more and more money out of the bucket, there's no money remaining to pay for other things. Someone has to sort out the priorities. Our founding fathers designed a constitutional republic that requires that the burden of sorting out these priorities should fall on the shoulders of elected officials. And that way, if the voters are unhappy with the priorities, they can choose, they can vote the guys out of office. Employee salaries and benefits consume the vast majority of tax dollars, in excess of 80% of many budgets. So issue 2 touches on how the bulk of your tax dollars are spent. The two problems, under the 1983 law, once something gets in the contract, it never gets out unless both sides agree. And there is little incentive for one side to agree to a change unless its members are getting something for it. So even if you learn something about something you don't like, our elected officials may be powerless to make changes unless the other side agrees. When the two sides to a contract can't agree, unelected persons, often labor lawyers, I've seen this myself, they are called in to suggest and sometimes decide what is fair. That's exactly what FDR and George Meany were talking about. You shouldn't have people making decisions who are not accountable to the voters. We changed the law so that you, the voters, have the final say on what is or is not fair. Those who oppose change want you to vote no on issue 2 and give that power back to labor lawyers. We trust you, they don't. We think that you should retain that power. That's why I think when you look at things like the Middletown fire contract and things like that, you get services in Middletown and the firefighters are doing the best they can and trying to be as fair as they can. It's the process that's wrong, not the firefighters, not the players in the process. And that's why we need to change the process.
Steve Lazarus.
Yeah, I hear this, that the people I don't trust the people, and that's outrageous. In fact, all that the unions are looking for is a fair process where someone other than one of the parties to the dispute can come in and make a fair decision. You know, going into a hearing, that if one side gets to make the final decision, what that decision is going to be. It's a waste of time. What the senator is suggesting here is somehow that this is unconstitutional, this system, that an unelected official can make this decision. The Supreme Court dealt with this issue back in the 80s. All these issues were raised whether it was constitutional. And this is what the Supreme Court said in response to the constitutional question. In 1989, Supreme Court of Ohio, the General Assembly wisely recognized, however, that without the right to strike, safety forces would have little strength to bring to the bargaining table. To compensate, the legislature provided for binding arbitration so that members of safety force and their employer may obtain independent, binding review of their contract proposals. The decision of the binding arbitrator is binding on both parties, whatever that decision may be. For safety forces, this provision is the heart of the act. Absent binding conciliation, the bargaining rights of safety forces would become virtually useless. The point being, there's no reason to have collective bargaining if one side holds all the cards. It's a sham. So why are we wasting our time with collective bargaining when one side gets to make the decision? Shannon Jones even said that both parties have to have something to lose in negotiations, or else there's no effective negotiations. Under Senate Bill 5, there is nothing for management to lose because they hold all the cards. And I beg to differ. I cited the provisions of the law to you. There is no ability for a union to take a decision of the city council or county commissioners, any employer, to the voters. That is not in this bill. I cited the provision where it's located. It's not there for the unions.
I do have a question on this side, then we'll come back over here. Just step up, introduce yourself, and Steve Lazarus will go first, and then Senator Coley will reply.
John Meyer, Liberty Township, Middletown Firefighter.
Step up just a little bit closer to the mic. Thank you.
John Meyer, Liberty Township, Middletown Firefighter. Question concerning Senate Bill 5 about merit-based pay. It's not we are paid by taxpayers' money. Senator, who decides your salary and your raises?
Steve, you'll go first then.
Yeah, I think there's a big problem with the whole concept of merit pay. It's not going to be in the bill for the police and fire, but you know, it's a subjective issue, and politics gets in the way in the public sector in a way that it does not in the private sector. And even the Liberty Council recognized that for police and fire, politics becomes a very, very problematic issue. And we have seen it over and over in the negotiations I'm involved in. In fact, it's interesting that Senator Coley brought up the Cincinnati fire negotiations that I went to fact finding. All those issues were brought up about ways that the city could save money because the city said they needed concessions. They needed money taken out of that contract. So I think it's very fair to say to the fact finder, if they're saying they don't have enough money to support this contract, then what could they be doing to raise more revenue? And there's lots of things that, you know, were brought up in the Senate and in the House about this bill. One of them being, why don't the senators and representatives agree to take a pay cut? Shared sacrifice. We all need to sacrifice, right?
Please hold your applause and cheering until the end.
There's been no sacrifice. And the issue of merit pay is even brought up for the senators and representatives. There was a specific bill that was raised, not a bill, but one of the senators brought up the idea of why don't we tie our pay to the unemployment rate in the state? And we'll take a 5% cut and we'll take a 10% if we have a higher unemployment rate than the national average. Where'd that go? Nowhere. And this is part of the problem. Shared sacrifice for everyone except the politicians. We see it over and over. The same politicians have the right to buy pension time that they haven't even worked. Years of service they never worked. And they say we'll fix it, but they never seem to get around to it.
Senator Coley.
You know, first, I get a efficiency check by the voters every 2 years and then every 4 years as a senator. You know, but for years, and you're seeing it tonight, first, in your glossary check, the word management equals elected official. Neutral party, neutral third party equals labor lawyer. Management equals elected official. You know, the salary of the legislature is set by the legislature. And by the Constitution of the state of Ohio, you know, unless you want to advocate representative government and you want to just have mob rule, then you look at the Constitution and you have a structured form of government. Fourth graders in this area understand that the legislative body writes the laws, the executive branch enforces it, and the judicial branch interprets them. You know, the creation of salaries are set by the legislative branch, it's enforced by the executive branch. You know, unless you want to give up a democratic form of government in a representative republic, then that's the way things are done. You have no choice in that area to reduce salaries because the Constitution of the state of Ohio forbids the reduction of salaries during the term that a legislator is in office. This was designed, unless you want only rich people serving in the legislature, this was designed so that you couldn't slash salaries and make legislators quit or otherwise not be able to provide for their families. So the process that we, you know, I understand the principles of fear and guilt and class envy. That's what it's worked for centuries. And that's what's going on the other side. They're trying to make you hate your legislature. They're trying to make you fear any change. And they're trying to make you jealous of anybody else who's got $1 more than you do. That, you shouldn't do that. You should look to a constitutional form of government and support issues too.
Step up, give your name, and you'll be addressing Senator Coley first, then Steve Lazarus.
My name is Greg Justice. I think Senate Bill 5 is trying to paint with a broad brush. All people under collective bargaining agreement pay something very little to their pension or their health care benefits. I know a lot of firefighters and police officers. I pay 10% toward my pension. I pay 15% toward my health care premium. In the private sector, the 401k contributions are tax deferred. So there was a gentleman before me asked a question about, you know, the percentage, you know, what statistics is it, you know, how many people in these labor agreements don't pay the 10%. Now, it's my opinion, it's not scientific, but a lot of research is done that most firefighters and police officers do pay their 10% and 15% for healthcare. But my question is about Ohio's veterans. It's been brought to my attention that Senate Bill 5 really takes a whack at our men and women that are serving in the armed services, taking the privilege away from the veterans' preference points and also not really assuring any kind of guarantees about their job when they return from deployments.
All right, we'll let the senator comment on that.
Yeah, I think this one's going to get chalked up into another column of misrepresentations. You know, I work on that bill, and I am not aware of any provision in that bill. No one has suggested that until this evening, that this bill would have some detrimental effect on members of the Ohio's Reserve and Guard and active duty military. You know, but your issue points on something that's also very important, and that is that when you're looking at public sector employees, you have to make sure that you have adequate staffing levels, and you got to be able to protect the public and do the things, the mission of the entity that you're negotiating a contract for. You know, those of us in the private sector understand when it comes to health insurance, we usually pay 20 to 50% of the premiums. We think that, and I agree with you, I think most state employees pay 10% of the retirement, 15%. That's why we came up with these numbers. But as the Democrat mayor of Toledo pointed out back when he was working as a firefighter in Toledo, because the contract with the Toledo firefighters required the city to pay 100% of health insurance premium and 100% of retirement contributions, the city of Toledo ran out of money and had to start laying off firefighters, one of which was him. What's safer and provides better protection for the public, having all firefighters pay 15% of their health insurance premiums or having fewer firefighters? Steve, in his reports and stuff that he submitted, and we've got copies of, he's advocated, hey, look, if there's not enough money, lay people off, and at least the people that are remaining will get, I think, what Steve called a fair wage. We think it's better to have everybody contribute a fair share and make sure that we have enough people in place. And that's why I think that the provisions of issue 2 are reasonable, and I encourage you to vote yes on issue 2.
Steve Lazarus.
Yeah, it's interesting, we've heard about this Toledo situation, what happened there. First of all, there's some misperceptions, I'll say, about what's going on, what happened in Toledo. First, the mayor was laid off before the collective bargaining bill 1984 was enacted. So any attempt to put his layoff at the hands of this collective bargaining bill should be cleared up. Secondly, what happened in Toledo? He said they were paying all this money for their pension pickup, they were paying all this money for their health care, so was Toledo able to fix that problem under the current law? And the answer is yes. Toledo said to their unions, you will start to pay more for your health care, and we are not going to pay your pension pickup anymore. The union said, no, we have this labor agreement, you have to pay. Well, Toledo went ahead and implemented and said, no, you're going to pay for this health care, and you're going to have your pension, you're going to pay for it. It went to the State Employment Relations Board. The union said, you can't do this to us. The State Employment Relations Board came back and said, yes, they can. Under the current collective bargaining law, it says that if there are exigent circumstances, that an employer can implement these types of provisions absent, without collective bargaining. So that problem in Toledo was fixed under the current law. So I think it's kind of funny that we bring up Toledo. Another interesting point is 15% on the health care because we think it's fair. Well, when this bill was first introduced by Shannon Jones, she said that they should pay 20%. Employees should pay a minimum of 20%. And you know why it got changed? It got changed because the legislators figured out that if they put 20% in this bill, someone was going to say to them, well, you guys only pay 15, so maybe you should pay 20 also. Now, on this question if it's constitutional to raise, to cut their salary, he's correct that for current people, you can't do it, but you can do it for new people. And in fact, that was in the budget bill. And they took it out before they passed the budget bill. They took it out. No pay cut for any future legislators.
All right, please step up real close to the mic, introduce yourself, and ask a question. Steve Lazarus will comment first, then Senator Coley.
My name is Troy Miller from Liberty Township. My question is for Senator Coley here. And you keep bringing up this, the mayor. Isn't the mayor triple dipping? The one from Toledo? Isn't he getting pensions from other things? Yeah, it's triple dipping. Yes, he is. My next thing is township trustees and township administrators Don't they pay their 100% on their pension? And what's your opinion on that?
Okay, a couple interesting points. First of all, pension pickups. I negotiate over 100 labor agreements, well over 100. And to my knowledge, there are only 2 that have a pension pickup in it. And those are ones that I inherited. This is not a common benefit. And it has nothing to do with the fact most public employees pay 10% on their pension. There is another bill that's in the legislature right now that deals with the pension issue. The only part of Senate Bill 5 that deals with the pension is a pension pickup, where some unions have negotiated, instead of wage increases or instead of other benefits, or to give up something else that they maybe were not getting, that they've negotiated that the employer would pay part of the pension. And the point earlier, it is correct that that's cheaper than a wage increase. Second point, on the double dipping, right now, there are employees in Hamilton County that work for the sheriff's office that were retired and came back at the same salary that they were making before they left. Now, if the legislature has got an idea of how they have to fix all this stuff, why isn't that in some of this legislation? Why isn't some of that being stopped? Because this is all, they're being able to buy their pension time, the double dipping, all this stuff they'll get back to later, but it never seems to come back. And these types of things need to be taken care of. You know, leadership starts at the top. And if everyone, all public employees are being asked to take pay cuts and to not have any third party look at their contract and to rely totally on what the employer is going to do, with the Cincinnati City Council, they'll do the right thing. And they're supposed to have faith in all that. Why doesn't leadership start at the top and the legislature agree to tighten their belts and take a pay cut?
Senator? Again, please hold your applause.
Again, you know, do you want your government run by elected officials, or do you want it run by labor lawyers? That's the choice that you're making with issue 2. For centuries, fear, guilt, and class envy have been the trusted tools of those who want to hide the truth. Robespierre and Lenin, as well as totalitarian rulers that followed, used these distortions and half-truths to convince citizens to support policies that actually brought those nations to ruin. You're doing the same thing here tonight. You're trying to talk about apples when we're talking about oranges, and you're talking about oranges when we're talking about apples. Is there a problem with double dipping in the state? You bet. And we are going to address that. And we're working on legislation that will do that. However, what we're dealing with issue 2 is we're dealing with collective bargaining and a law that was rushed through by a Democrat House and a Democrat Senate, signed by a Democrat governor in about that same amount of time that issue 2 passed. And when we looked at the 1983 law, we didn't scuttle it, we didn't throw it out. We said, how can we improve it? And so we tailored Senate Bill 5 to address the problem issues. And if you don't want public officials who you elect to have any ability to make any change, why go to the polls? You have to empower local governments to get control over their budgets. And you can't do that when there's a bucket of money and you just let a lot of great lawyers, and Steve is a very great labor lawyer. And the guys who represent the police do a great job, the guys who represent the teachers. And when you're putting these guys all at war to divvy up a bucket of money, all right? And you have no ability for the voters to be at the table. And when Steve talks about management not being represented, he's talking about the voters' elected officials. And it's not fair that voters don't have more of a say.
All right, Senator Coley will go first. Your question, introduce yourself first.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Joe Listen. I'm with Local 48 Cincinnati, Ohio Firefighters. My question is this, Senators. I've seen you look at your notes and constantly read from what you have on that table. But this is a simple one for you. How do you negotiate? Well, first of all, you said that you are judged by people that are superior to you. But I disagree with that. I think that you're judged by your district and the voters that voted you in. So if you do a good job, then you remain in office. If you don't do a good job, then you vote it out. My problem is, as an individual, how do you say to my supervisor that my job is not good or my job is good? How do you make sure that
that individual does not use biases. He may or may not like what how I work or whatnot, but how do you make sure in this bill that I won't be laid off because I'm not liked? How do you take the emotion
All right,
of that?
let's give the senator a chance to go.
Well, you know, I thank you for your question. And, you know, like presidents who have been elected in this country, I always look at the voters as my superiors. And they're going to review my work at every election. And if they don't like the job I'm doing, I won't be coming back in an elected office. So, you know, with that in mind, you know, we try to represent our communities. And what you're talking about is the problem that corporations and private industry has wrestled with for thousands of years. How do I evaluate one employee against the other? And we found ways to do it in the private sector. But because we're concerned about, well, maybe my superior will use, you know, some rating system that I don't like, maybe this or maybe that, we're not going to have any system except tenure. That's crazy. I think Fran Tarkington had a great article that came out today where Fran Tarkington talked about, can you imagine the NFL if we ran the NFL like we run our school system and everybody has tenure and no one would go to the games, no one would watch. You don't allow the best to be rewarded. And those are the things that Senate Bill 5, we're not saying that seniority should play no part of things. We're just saying that seniority shouldn't be the only issue. And that's why we want performance to play a part of an employee's compensation. And we do that in the private sector every day. So I don't know the specifics of your employment and your ratings, but I have confidence in a system that works for this country and has built this country into one of the most economically powerful nations in the history of the earth. I think if we can do that in the private sector, we can bring some of that into the public sector.
Steve Lazarus?
Yeah, first of all, the teachers, we've heard the example of teachers on the seniority issue, and the you know, need for performance evaluations. Keep in mind, everyone, that the budget bill that was passed by the state has a system in it, a performance system that's in that budget bill. That's not subject to referendum. That is in the budget bill. There's an evaluation process in there that has performance, and there's also something in there that says layoffs will not be based on seniority. That's the law. You don't need issue 2 to fix those things. Those are in the law as it relates to teachers right now. This bill has a lot of other big problems that, and we talk about this being rushed through just like it was in 1983. There's some big differences. No one seems to have gotten the facts straight on this. Senate Bill 133, which was the collective bargaining law in 1984, it was introduced in March of 1983, and it was signed in July of 83, 4 months. Senate Bill 5 was introduced February the 8th, 2011. It was signed March 31, 2011, 1.5 months. 1.5 months from when it was introduced to when it was passed. There were other previous efforts before Senate Bill 133 in 1984 was passed. Those include Senate Bill 70 in 1975 and Senate Bill 222 in 1977. There were many, many similar efforts before Senate Bill 133 was passed after several months in 1984. You know, there's a lot of misconceptions about this. Bottom line, there is no fair, balanced playing field that comes out of this process. And no one can dispute that because one side holds all the cards. There is no appeal process that the unions can take advantage of if they don't like the results of what the city council does.
All right, we'll go to this side, then we'll come back over to you, sir. Introduce yourself, step up loud, and you'll go with Steve Lazarus first, then Senator Coley will comment.
My name's Emma Lipscomb. I'm a student and I live in Westchester, Ohio. I was wondering, would the elimination of public worksmen's ability to bargain collectively impact the quality of their work? If so, would this bill in fact save money in the long run? Thank you.
Could you say again, would it impact who? I'm sorry, I missed you. Would the passage of it impact?
Just go ahead and read your question. That's okay. Yeah, we
Would
just
the
wanna make sure.
elimination of public worksmen's ability to bargain collectively impact the quality of their work? If so, would this bill in fact save money in the long run?
Right, yeah, let me respond to that, because we've done some really neat things in Cincinnati, particularly with the police there. There's a collaborative agreement that the Cincinnati FOP was a party to. And what this was, it was a total revamp of the policies and procedures of the Cincinnati Police Department. The city was a party, the FOP was a party, and a lot of the minority community in the city. And everybody worked very hard to get a product that has worked remarkably well. In fact, to the extent that there was some discussion about the sheriff's office taking over the Cincinnati Police some months ago, and there was an outcome in the community about that this would be a terrible thing, because the Cincinnati Police are so well trained, they do such a good job, and that translates into fewer lawsuits and all sorts of savings to jurisdictions. Well, so your question is, how involved are the unions going to be when they have no effective say in negotiations? I would say it would have a very large impact. I can tell you personally that from the FOP's perspective in Cincinnati, under Senate Bill 5, they would not have had an equal seat at that table, and they would not have participated in the manner that they did that led to a tremendous process that we have all gained from in the city. It's remarkable to think about. 2001 in the city of Cincinnati, and the Cincinnati police were hated by the minority community there. To 2011, fast forward, and they are up in arms over the fact that they may lose Cincinnati police protection to another agency. So involvement and good management embraces fair say in the process. And under Senate Bill 5, unions will have no effective voice in negotiation. In fact, when employers hold all the cards, there's no reason to negotiate. Thank you.
Senator Coley.
You know, it's funny, again, management equals your elected officials. You know, it's funny how if you don't rate anybody and you don't have any performance pay, nobody works extra hard and comes up with innovative ideas, and all they do, all that stuff, they get nothing extra in their paycheck. But in Steve's world, those people are going to do better than in the rest of the universe, where if you get a little something extra in your paycheck, you kind of come up with more creative ideas. But Steve feels that putting performance incentives into a labor contract and requiring that they be in there will mean that people won't be as productive, they'll be less productive. It defies logic. And it works nowhere else. Can you, again, to quote Fran Tarkington, can you imagine the NFL if it didn't matter how well you did your job? You could stay forever. It was all based on tenure. That's insane. Of course, the provisions of issue 2 will foster better relationships and better productivity amongst the workers, because for once they're going to be able to be compensated for these great things. Doc and I have talked on the air about it in the field of education and what we're doing with the Digital Learning Clearinghouse and ways that Ohio's teachers are going to be touching students around the state and around the world. Those teachers are going to be compensated for those efforts. And you're going to have teachers get paid like the rock stars that they are. Now, are teachers going to do that if they get the exact same paycheck as the person who doesn't lift a finger or do anything extra? Of course they wouldn't. Why would they go through that effort? So I think the provisions of issue 2 will result in a better relationship between the elected officials and the people and their employees. And that's why I think that you should support issue 2.
All right, you had one, sir, and then we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, my name is Rick Buch. I work for Butler County Sheriff's Office. I just wanted to comment. You keep going back to the people being envious, class wars, and this and that. I don't envy you because you might make a lot of money. I like my job. I just don't want the rules changed in the middle of it. My question is, why was Senator Sykes removed from the committee before the vote last year?
Please don't clap. Please wait till the end. Senator Coley, you're first.
I wasn't in the Senate when the Senate removed Senator Sykes. I worked on the bill in the House of Representatives at that time. and I replaced a member of the finance committee who was working on the budget, Dick Adams, and I was appointed to the committee to take Dick Adams' place. And these are standard things that are done when you're dealing with heavy and intense legislation where you got to have a lot of people working. So I don't know about Senator Sykes' story, but I can tell you mine. And I got put on the committee. I got put on the committee to replace Dick Adams, who was on the finance committee. Look, you know, you can complain about the process all you want, but the bottom line is the process was fair. You know, there were actually more hearings on this bill than there were for 130. There were more witnesses.
Please, please.
In this bill. There were more witnesses and more testimony relative to Senate Bill 5 than there were in 1983. Now, I understand the emotion of the thing, and to the extent that if I had a situation where the cards were stacked in my favor, as 28 years of working under a law that set a poor foundation has led to, I wouldn't want it changed. But it has reached the point, ladies and gentlemen, in Wayne County, Ohio, where one of these unelected people involved in the process just decided that even though there wasn't enough money, and it's in his report, even though there's not enough money for the local government to afford this contract, I am instructing the local government to raise taxes, borrow money, or sell off assets to pay for this new raise that I am ordering that they get. Now that case is up on appeal right now, but that's the distorted process you get if you don't support issue 2. And I don't want to see that continue in Ohio. I want to see improvements to be made to this process.
Hey, hang on a second, Steve Brady, please keep your comments. And what you're doing is you're disrespecting your neighbors. There are a lot of heated emotions and opinions about this. If I can bite my tongue on this and moderate this event, you certainly can as well. I understand you have questions. If you have questions, step up and answer them instead of giving your opinion. Please don't shout out and please don't clap if you do like something, because although you may support it, you're disrespecting your neighbors. Let's prove that in a democracy we can actually have these guys come up here and debate the issues, put out good information, and share their opinion. If that's possible, then let's continue. Steve Lazarus.
Yes, thank you. First of all, indicating that the cards have been stacked in the union's favor under the current law is simply not accurate. Both sides have an equal opportunity to present their case to a third party. I mean, that's not stacked deck. Both sides make their arguments, and the third party, and I don't know where this labor attorney comes from. I've been doing this for 22 years. They're not all labor attorneys. You get 5 names from the state board. Each party gets to strike 2 of them. The last person standing gets to hear the case. You know, I don't get to decide who hears these cases. Management doesn't get to decide. It's whoever's left. There are professors, there are business people, all kinds of people on this CERB panel. So I've never said that they're all labor lawyers. I think this has been, stated here, but not by me. Secondly, the cards would be stacked under Senate Bill 5. They would be stacked 100% in management hand. That's not a good process. That does not foster labor management relations. People don't work well together when one side holds all the cards. And a lot of people in management have said that this bill is flawed. The sheriffs in Butler County, in Claremont County, in Warren County, or the command staff of Greene County sheriffs have all said this bill goes too far. It will not be good for us. There's a group of employer labor relations experts who are employed by more management than any other group in the state of Ohio. And they even have said they don't like this bill. They said that the basic system of public employee collective bargaining has worked well to resolve employment-related issues. We can fix this law without throwing the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. Overreaching now will not serve the people of Ohio well and will just invite future backlash with still more harm to cost-effective government. And this came out of this group before it even went to the House.
All right, there we go. Introduce yourself, and you'll be addressing Steve Lazarus first, and then Senator Coley will comment.
Thank you. My name is A.J. Smith, and I am a Middletown City Council member. And so I guess I fall into that category of management, perhaps. However, I'd like to thank you both and acknowledge you both. I was born and raised in a liberal family, and like I said before, now I sit on the other side of the table. So I have a deep appreciation for both sides. However, the only reason I've gotten up to now address you is because of a comment that you made, Senator Coley. And that was about Middletown City Council and some of the adversities and hurdles that we're having to jump through at this point. Well, I assert that your context and pretense is wrong. And to me, it's very simple. The reason we're having budgetary problems has nothing to do with our collective bargaining. It has everything to do with the loss of industry and different vibrant jobs and companies that Middletown once had and the surrounding region. In addition to the fact that you figure we just lost the local government fund due to the estate tax, we just lost tangible personal property. What is that, Senate Bill 3? Something along those lines. And so I guess my question is, as opposed to punishing those middle and working class families, those that teach our children and run into our burning buildings and run into gunshots, or if you will, and excuse the rhetoric, but this is exactly what happens.
You need to get to wrap it up and get to your question, sir. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm almost here. Thank you. Why not help us build more vibrant communities by helping us bring jobs and more businesses to the community and stop giving out all the corporate welfare by giving these huge corporations these tax breaks that they're certainly not worthy of.
Steve Lazarus, your comments.
All right, thank you. And let me say this, when, I've used the term management, good management, and I've included in that some of the sheriffs that I've mentioned. Good management is not afraid of fair collective bargaining. Good management is not afraid of it. They embrace it because they know that you get the best product if both parties at the table come there prepared to discuss the tough issues and both parties have something to gain and something to lose. Because that's the only time you're really going to grapple with these issues and get the best results. So good management, good city councils have said, we don't have a problem with this. In fact, 5 of the largest cities in the state of Ohio have gone on record of saying, we oppose this because we know it will hurt our labor management relations.
And Middletown is one of those communities.
Well, Middletown's not one of the 5 biggest, but a lot of other cities have taken the same approach, and I appreciate that. So we get back to some of these other questions about, public employees, their pay is too much, they're overpaid. And I represent police officers and firefighters. And I ask this question to myself because I don't know the answer to it. And I would ask the same question to you, which is, how much is too much to pay someone who goes to work every day and says to their spouse or their children, goodbye, and they may or may not be coming home at the end of their shift? How much is too much to pay for that job? And I don't know, because we hear for the teachers, they had all these statistics of, well, the public school teachers make this, the private school. They don't have any statistics for police officers and firefighters because they don't exist in the private sector. So there is no statistical evidence at all on that. Thank you.
Senator Coley.
Your question acts like everything happens in a vacuum. Ohio is shedding business because we have not righted our ship of state. We are one of the most expensive states to operate in the nation. Now, since 2005, when I took office, we've fallen from the 5th highest tax state in the nation to the 18th. And we're working to try to improve that so that we can attract business. But to do that, we must lower the cost of our state and local government. We can't work in a vacuum. And since we're not going to raise taxes and drive more business out of the state, then we can't give those checks to local government anymore. We must give them the tools that they need to control their costs. And that's what Senate Bill 5 did, and that's why you should support issue 2. You can't work in a vacuum here. You can't say we're losing business and our cities are having trouble. Do you think it was coincidence that AK Steel left Middletown? And, they took a share of stock from $3 a share to $53 a share in 1 year. They've done a great job. The management and the workers at that company have done a fantastic job of turning things around at AK Steel. And they increased the shares of stock and the value of the shareholder worth. And they happened to relocate to Westchester for a lot of reasons besides monetary, because they wanted to attract more people, things they needed to do. But it just so happened that they opened in their corporate office in Westchester right before the shares vested. Why should every corporate officer of AK Steel have to pay City of Middletown income tax on shares of stock where they weren't going to get a check? And that was an improper thing to do anyhow. But and then you want to complain that the business is leaving. You've got to lower costs. Issue 2 gives you that ability.
Ma'am, step up and introduce yourself, but for the rest of you stay in line, if you want to sit right here so you're not standing the whole time, that may help out a little bit. You can form a line and the same thing over there. Introduce yourself. You'll be addressing Senator Coley first and then Steve Lazarus.
Hi, I'm Erin. So Ohio was recently ranked in the 40s for being business friendly, and Indiana was ranked number 6 for being business friendly. How do you think SB 5 will bring, jobs passing of the law when other jobs and big businesses want to come to Ohio, kind of like Texas and any that are right to work states?
Well, what it does, issue 2 does, is it gives local government control over their cost structure. We no longer look to unelected people. Often, I had a case once with the labor lawyer, the lawyer who was the arbitrator in the case where Pope and Jeters, the 2 Cincinnati police officers that were killed. This is the guy that reinstated the dispatchers who the city fired after they refused to send help right away. And so that's how I know labor lawyers are involved. He was the arbitrator in their case. But in any event, the reason what issue 2 does is it gives local government control over their budget. And it lets them say, okay, hey, look, here's what we're going to do. Here's the pot of money we have. Here's how we're going to allocate. All right? And no longer do you just have somebody coming in saying, well, in Defiance, Ohio, they're paying this, and in Wapakoneta, they're doing that, and therefore you should, increase our money. It puts the power in the hands of the elected officials, which my version of the Ohio Constitution says that's where it belongs. So I think what it does by giving control over local government over their budget, it helps them drive down costs, which means we can lower tax rates and attract business. And by doing that and cleaning up some of the other anti-business stuff that we've been doing in the state in the past, we can start, again, attract business to the state and bring jobs and prosperity back to Ohio.
Steve?
Yeah, first, on these studies, there's studies that are all over the place. I mean, there's one that says that Ohio is close to the middle of the pack when it comes to tax burdens around the country. There's another study that's got them 18th, as Bill has cited. There's other 2 new studies, surveys of tax burdens on businesses and their owners say that Ohio was among the most friendly in the nation in 2009 and 2010. So, we talk about the studies, there's studies all over the place, but Ohio, according to some studies, is very competitive. Senator Coley talked about how we want to give local governments control over their cost structure. Well, what about these mandates in these bills that say you must pay at least 15% for health care? You must not do pension pickups. Those aren't giving local government the ability to do things the way local government wants. Those are specific mandates from Columbus. They're telling local governments how they have to do business. So this idea that we need to let the local governments have the flexibility, they've taken that flexibility away from local governments. Additionally, we talk about these unelected arbitrators. Well, now I know where we get the idea that they're all labor attorneys, because the one case that Senator Coley was involved in. I've been involved in hundreds of these over the past 20-some years. They're not all labor attorneys, so this is a misconception. But there are only, in 2009 and 2010, only 20 cases went to binding arbitration, 10 per year. Is this going to change the ship in Ohio and set us off to sail with the economy? It's going to turn everything? Of course not. This isn't the problem, folks. Collective bargaining and public employees are not the enemy of the state. All right? They work for the state, and that money, that's not tax money once you earn it. It's the employees' money, and they pay taxes too.
Ma'am, you'll be addressing Steve Lazarus first, and then Senator Coley.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Stoker. I'm a trustee in Westchester Township. And I'm really at a quandary over what Senator Coley has said. Apparently, he believes that issue 2 is going to lower the cost of local government. Here's my quandary as a elected official of a local community. Issue 2 says that we are going to have to force our employees to pay at least 10% of their retirement. Our employees already pay the entire amount the legislation requires, which in the case of, for example, firefighters is 24% of their salary. We work very hard to keep costs down, but our situation, which I believe is echoed all over the state, is the fact that we have lost our local government funds. For Westchester, that's about $1.6 million. We will be losing it over the next 3 years, we believe. We're losing our tangible personal property tax over the next few years, which I believe will be about $3 million a year. We've lost the estate tax, which was close to $1 million a year. Issue 2 is supposed to help us recoup this $5 to $6 million a year. Issue 2, if we increase the burden on our employees of paying their health premiums from 12% to 15%, saves us a couple $100,000 a year. I'm sorry, I don't know how we are going to continue to maintain our roads with this kind of math that you're doing.
Okay, let's let the senator comment.
Yeah, if you can figure out a way around it, I'd sure appreciate it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah, very good point. You know, the money, Columbus politicians say, we're gonna take all this from you, but we're going to give you this magical tool that's going to supposedly save you millions and millions of dollars. Well, you know, it doesn't work that way. You have employees, they have families, and, you know, Senator Coley respectfully says, you know, that, well, you know, us legislatures, you want people to take this job so they can provide for their families. Well, $60,000 a year to go to Columbus 2 days a week. Come on, folks. You know, I mean, that's a part-time job. This is public employees' full-time job for them and their families. This isn't just something they do a couple of days a week on the side. So, you know, there's a real disconnect here, and there are loads of unfunded mandates that Columbus politicians keep trickling down and saying, you figure out how you're going to pay for it. You do this, you do that. Senate Bill 5 is not this magic bullet. And if an employer, a city council, a county commissioner were to use it that way, then shame on them. Because their employees and their families are worth more than that.
Bill?
The distortions continue. I love this. You know, first, Steve suggested that issue 2 requires that all local governments must pay 15% of the employee's health insurance. It requires that they cannot pay more than 85%. It doesn't require that they must pay 15%. Okay. The second thing is, you know, when you're talking about, you know, empowering local government to control, no, what you're talking about is giving local government the ability and not handing that off to an unelected third party, often, but not always, oftentimes a labor lawyer, okay? Now, the important things here, you want to look at what's happened in this nation, in this state. You've watched the rest of the states grow. We just lost 2 congressmen because the economic climate in Ohio is not as favorable as other states, okay? You've watched the deterioration in the budgets in the state. You've watched the cities kind of decay. And you want to act like the cost of running state government has nothing to do with that. We realize that we must lower the costs. And we must give local government the tools that they need to negotiate. And they will no longer be able to punt to an unelected third party. Let me give you the one I gave on the floor of the House. You could have somebody who pretends he's a real friend of the taxpayers, and he can propose as a final proposal under the current law, a proposal that's unrealistic. It's not in the realm of reality. And Steve could come in for his clients and propose something that's high, but not unrealistic. And in that case, the fact finder must award the money to Steve, the increase to Steve, because the other one's unrealistic. You got to have transparency. You got to have openness. You need to.
All right, we'll have time for probably 2 more questions, so we'll get to you first, 2 gentlemen. I believe we'll go ahead and go to you next. Introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Rick Mara, I'm from Westchester.
Association of Professional Firefighters. I almost elected you with 1 word there. Senator Coley.
Well, there you have it. Do we address the problems with our collective bargaining law, or do we do nothing? As you heard here this evening, for the most part, opponents of this bill refused to participate in the legislative process. They were the ones who just stood back and chanted, "Kill the bill." They acknowledge that there are problems, but they offer no solutions. Now, some, as I said, some ignored the threats of their union leaders and made suggestions. The teachers who had the courage to suggest that peer review be included in employee evaluations find that peer review is now included. The employees that suggested that we make it clear that personal safety equipment remains the proper subject of negotiations for all employees, they find that those clarifications were added to the bill. Since 1983, when the 2 sides to contract negotiations couldn't reach an agreement, unelected persons, often labor lawyers, have been the final judge of what is fair. We changed the law so that you, the voters, have the final say on what is or is not fair. Those who oppose change say that letting the voters have the final say means that we have, quote, abolished collective bargaining, unquote. They don't trust you to have the final say on their employment contract, and they're asking you to vote no on issue 2 to give that power back to unelected labor lawyers. Since 1983, any legislator who has dared to propose even the slightest change in collective bargaining law has been attacked and vilified by those opposed to change. Earlier this year, a number of legislators, some from tough districts, had the courage to vote for change. I'm asking you